in 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Cat Weasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this story, we head back to 1973 for Tub Horton versus the Weasel. Stumpy Sanderson, me and Beaky Miller stood loitering near the corridor which led to the wrestlers' changing room areas, having just got there in double quick time, and we waited for the expected arrival of a posse of handbag-clutching old grannies and housewives with sinister intentions, who would soon be causing the explosion for which Stumpy had earlier lit the fuse. We had all just enjoyed a great Saturday afternoon's wrestling entertainment at the Queensway Hall, and the programme had included many of our favourites, characters such as Chavos, Don Grayson, Jerry McMasters, Big Frankie Chamberlain, Little Frankie Chamberlain, Barney Kipper, and the local champion, Tub Horton. And one of our pastimes was to try and collect the wrestlers' autographs as they all arrived at the venue between late morning and very early afternoon. But there was one name that was missing from our collection, and that was the arch-heel wrestler and villain who had come down from the Midlands for this afternoon's top-of-the-bill match with Tub Horton, the Weasel. Earlier in the day, Stumpy, me and Beaky, along with a few other kids, had as usual waited in the cold in our bomber jackets and monkey boots, waiting for the wrestlers to arrive in their various Fords and Vauxhalls. But when the small and wiry, brown, slick-back-haired Weasel had arrived in his Ford Zodiac, he had simply marched past us with a garishly made-up and leopard-skin-clad lady friend in tow, and in stark and impolite contrast to the friendly demeanour from the other wrestlers, had sneered at us. "Out of my way, you urchins, I don't do autographs." We were stunned, some of the lads giving him a few boos. But Stumpy's reaction was, "He's just an arrogant swine who needs to remember who pays his wages. We'll do for him." And thus the seeds were sown. The bout between Tub Horton and the Weasel was a classic. Tub gave it his all, and despite his getting on in years and girth, put up a great fight, constantly circling his much smaller and wirier opponent, taking whatever opportunity he could to try to crush him beneath his great weight. But when the Weasel, who had a notorious reputation for beating much larger opponents than him in their own backyard, and who knew just how to goad and antagonise the crowd, adopting all the favourite heel wrestler tactics, bending the rules and pushing the envelope, antagonising the baying grannies and housewives into a frenzy, went into his trademark moves, and with Tub now looking like a deflated and spent tyre, we all knew the end was near. As Tub reeled and rocked from a series of vicious chops to the body, the Weasel then proceeded to disorientate Tub with a frantic, erratic, and bizarre dance, confusing and freezing him. The effect on Tub was bewildering, and with Tub standing frozen in stunned terror, the Weasel then suddenly pounced, using a special double-handed locking grip on the base of Tub's neck, clamping on and drawing and sapping all of Tub's strength, whose legs, to great groans from the crowd, gave way as, like a stricken mastodon, he collapsed and slumped to the floor in a semi-unconscious state. Emitting his notorious victory shriek, the Weasel then grabbed hold of Tub's legs, dragged him over to his own corner, and as the referee counted Tub out, stood triumphant over his defeated opponent. As soon as the lights went up, Stumpy spoke. "Okay, let's go light that fuse." And the three of us darted off down to the front row, where there sat 7 hair-netted old grannies and hardened housewives in woolen coats, with faces like perished and overstretched hot water bottles, chins on which you could crack Brazil nuts, cigarettes hanging off their lips, wearing unpleasant thick stockings and hard-wearing shoes, and carrying large handbags, led by that well-known local battleship, Doreen Braithwaite. As usual, they had spent the afternoon shouting out and catcalling to some of the wrestling villains, adding to the entertainment and causing great roars of laughter amongst the crowd. Although they hadn't done so today, on some occasions they had even been known to launch attacks from ringside on some of these villains with their handbags. "Hello, Mrs. Braithwaite. Did you enjoy the wrestling?" said Stumpy.
"Hello, lads. Yes, we did. But poor old Tub, wish he'd have won. We can't stand that Weasel. All that posturing and shrieking."
"Yeah," nodded Stumpy. "He's not a very nice character at all. Refused to sign any autographs for us. And he had a few things to say about you ladies, too." We immediately saw hackles rise.
"What do you mean? What did he have to say?"
demanded Mrs. Braithwaite, a dark expression crossing her ominous brow. "He said that he wasn't looking forward to being here in Dunstable, as he'd heard the front row of the crowd had the ugliest collection of old battle axes anyone had ever seen, with faces that could sink 1,000 ships.
"What?"
roared Mrs. Braithwaite.
"Right, we'll see about him. Come on, ladies."
Grinning broadly, Stumpy then said to me and Beaky, "Quick, let's get to the changing room area before them. This we've got to see." And so now, as we stood waiting in that corridor that led to the changing room area, we saw marching toward us those 7 formidable old grannies and housewives, rolling up their woolen coat sleeves. They marched to the entrance where a mild and meek attendant stood. "Hello, Mrs. Braithwaite. I'm afraid you can't go down there."
"Get out of my way, sunshine. Where's the Weasel? We've got an appointment with him."
As they simply barged past the totally powerless attendant, we watched on astonished as we saw being pulled from their handbags a selection of rolling pins, coshes, and a couple of steam irons. We never did find out exactly what happened in the Weasel's changing room, although even from where we were standing, we could hear a great commotion as the posse burst into the room, followed by a hideous squealing and hissing sound, such as a weasel would give when cornered. And while the Weasel never did return to Dunstable, we did hear on good authority, through the wrestling grapevine, that for the next few months, crowds in the Midlands noticed that as well as having large handbag-sized indentations and what looked like cosh marks on his back and torso, his previously pointy and sharp face now looked like it had been flattened with a steam iron. Thank Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bon nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy. Yeah.